Let's begin with the foundations. Welcome to another lecture. I am Professor Alexei. With me is Priyanka. Today we examine AEW Double or Nothing, specifically the 2026 edition, as a case study in how a modern wrestling promotion uses ritual calendar placement, thematic branding, and distribution strategy to crescendo long arcs into a single night of consequence.
I guess we can start by thinking about what Double or Nothing is in the first place. It's a pay-per-view, right? But also one of the big ones for AEW.
To frame our discussion, AEW Double or Nothing is one of the promotion's big five pay-per-views, alongside All In, All Out, Full Gear, and Revolution. It traditionally lands on Memorial Day weekend, which is not incidental. It is a deliberate annual anchor that creates a repeatable destination for traveling fans and a predictable storytelling cadence each spring. The event carries a gambling motif, cards, roulette, and high-risk imagery, signaling that characters will, as it were, wager status and identity as much as victories. It is important to define a few terms. Pay-per-view or PPV is a one-time purchase broadcast, now complemented by subscription access points. A title versus hair match is an apuesta-style wager. One side risks a championship, the other risks being shaved, which has post-match consequences that persist into subsequent television. A stadium stampede is a multi-person brawl staged across a stadium's unique geography. In 2026, notably, that geography was a tennis venue. We also note street fight and I quit stipulations. The former removes disqualifications and expands the arena as a legal space, and the latter ends only by verbal submission, thereby guaranteeing a decisive conclusion. Finally, the buy-in refers to AEW's pre-show, used to prime the audience and nudge last-minute purchases.
I think the next thing we should talk about is why this show matters. Like, beyond the branding, what is at stake each year?
Clearly, Double or Nothing functions as a spring apex. AEW structures Dynamite and Collision to culminate here, so payoffs and relaunches coexist. The Memorial Day placement increases travel elasticity and social viewing. A long weekend can lift live attendance and streaming concurrency. The challenge, of course, is to escalate each year without diluting identity. You must preserve the gambling motif and decisive stakes while finding fresh spectacle that does not feel like an algorithmic repeat of last spring's attractions.
Maybe a simple point here. The weekend timing seems like a small choice, but it shapes behavior. Families travel, friends plan watch parties. It is kind of the built-in nudge.
In this context, yes. The calendar is, if you will, the soft power of the product. Moving forward, let us ground ourselves in the 2026 edition. It was held in May 2026 at Louis Armstrong Stadium in Queens, the first Double or Nothing in the New York metro area. A tennis stadium reconfigured for wrestling is a subtle but memorable production differentiator. The card comprised 12 matches, 3 on the buy-in. The buy-in was hosted by Renee Paquette, alongside WWE Hall of Famer Mick Foley. Foley's on-screen AEW pay-per-view debut brought novelty without intervening in outcomes. On the main card, the opener set a ferocious tone. Christian Cage and Adam Copeland, Cage and Cope, defeated FTR in a New York street fight with an I quit condition to win the AEW World Tag Team Championship, averting their own breakup clause. Mid-card, Konosuke Takeshita defeated Kazuchika Okada for the International Championship. The Stadium Stampede saw Jericho, the Hurt Syndicate's Bobby Lashley and Shelton Benjamin, and the Elite, Kenny Omega, Jack Perry, Matt Jackson, and Nick Jackson, Defeat the Demand, the Don Callis family's Mark Davis and Andrade El Idolo, and the Dogs, Clark Connors and David Finlay. The Owen Hart Cup quarterfinals were integrated into the evening, with brackets pointing to finals at Forbidden Door in June 2026 and title shots at All In August 2026. Following an injury to Willow Nightingale, Alex Windsor's opponent was announced as a wild card, and Athena versus Mina Shirakawa was also scheduled as a quarterfinal. Kyle Fletcher returned from a spring injury. Broadcast duties featured Excalibur, Tony Schiavone, Nigel McGuinness, Jim Ross, Don Callis, and Taz, with a Spanish team for accessibility. Finally, the main event. MJF defeated Darby Allin in a title versus hair match to reclaim the AEW World Championship, preserving his hair after weeks of very public negotiation.
Isn't it interesting how the hair wager itself became a marketing engine? Especially because, he first tried to offer his scarf and $1 million instead. And earlier in March, Darby beat MJF in 2 minutes 15 seconds after 4 coffin drops, the fastest AEW title win. That kind of whiplash makes the rematch feel statistically unstable, like anything could happen quickly.
Mathematically, volatility sells. Brevity in March reframed May as a referendum on whether that sprint was an aberration or a new equilibrium. The scarf and cash feint fit MJF's persona, while allowing Allin to set moral terms by demanding hair. The visual stakes are, arguably, more valuable than any prop. To offer a personal note, professional wrestling at its best resembles chess played with narrative pieces. Each move has positional value beyond the square you occupy. A stipulation, a venue, a cameo, they are all tempi. To spend them wisely is the art. In a street fight with I quit rules, for example, the decisive verbal concession is the checkmate that justifies the prior chaos. This brings us to the first of 3 larger questions. How has Double or Nothing evolved since 2019? The constants are instructive. Memorial Day weekend timing, the gambling brand, and the expectation of either title changes or high experimentation. Over time, AEW has leveraged the show to toggle between traditional championship matches and spectacle engines such as Stadium Stampede, and to place celebrity or legacy figures with restraint, as with Mick Foley on the 2026 pre-show. What has changed is venue ambition and card architecture. We observe greater integration across the PPV calendar, early round Owen Hart Cup matches feeding finals at Forbidden Door and title shots at All In, which is longitudinal storytelling rather than isolated peaks. Production-wise, multi-language commentary teams and unusual venues like a USTA tennis stadium have differentiated the signal without abandoning the core.
I'm curious about the gambling theme. When the show is not in Las Vegas, does it still matter? Or does it become just graphic design?
It's crucial to understand that motifs operate as narrative contracts, not merely as decor. Even outside Nevada, the gambling frame cues risk-reward storytelling. Title versus hair is a wager. A multi-faction stadium stampede is a portfolio bet on chaos. And opening with a layered stipulation is, in effect, going all in on immediacy. In 2026, the New York backdrop simply recontextualized the brand. The cards were the same, the table was different. Next, let's explore a counterfactual. What if Ricochet had not interfered in Jack Perry's national championship defense against Mark Davis on May 9th? In the historical record, that interference cost Perry his title and catalyzed the Elite, Perry, the Young Bucks, and Kenny Omega, joining Jericho, who had already aligned with the Hurt Syndicate, to balance against the Demand, callous affiliates, and the dogs. The result was a stadium stampede of considerable scale. Absent the interference, we can infer a smaller coalition. Jericho still had motive after back-to-back pinfall losses to Ricochet, but the emotional bridge for the elite would have been weaker. The match might have stayed a contained grudge rather than expanding to stadium-wide warfare. Fewer bodies, fewer set pieces, less variance.
Can we say that the interference recast the heels as disruptors of championship integrity, so the babyface side unified around a shared norm? If that cue vanished, would Jericho's team cohesion have been shakier?
Precisely. The interference functioned as a coordination device. It gave the elite a principled entry point rather than a mere friendship cameo. Without it, Jericho might lean on Lashley and Benjamin alone, potent but less stylistically diverse than a blended unit with Omega and the Bucks. And in a tennis stadium where spatial variety is the match's secret oxygen, diversity of styles translates into better use of concourses, stairwells, and bowls. In simpler terms, the incident was the hinge that opened the larger door. On to our next point, distribution strategy. AEW's PPVs in the United States are available on HBO Max at a special subscriber rate, and in parallel on Prime Video, Triller TV, ppv.com, and YouTube. With bar chain broadcasts at Dave & Buster's and Tom's Watch Bar, and internationally outside the US and Canada on My AEW. The benefits are reduced friction and broader reach. Communal watch environments amplify social proof, and multi-platform access respects consumer heterogeneity. The challenges are non-trivial. Potential channel cannibalization, pricing signal complexity, and fragmented analytics, which can obfuscate conversion attribution and lifetime value modeling.
Building on that, what comes to mind next is future adaptation. Do you see more dynamic bundling across tournaments and PPVs, more multilingual feeds, or maybe partnerships with regional hubs to grow outside North America?
To elaborate, we should test three hypotheses. First, subscription adjuncts that bundle event clusters. For example, Owen Hart Cup rounds through Forbidden Door into all-in title shots, could drive cohort retention if pricing and messaging are coherent. Second, multilingual commentary and region-time shoulder content may raise international penetration via My AEW, provided discovery surfaces are localized. Third, formalized watch party circuits can be treated as network nodes. If bar partners correlate with higher social media lift, that feedback loop justifies co-promoted micro-activations. Areas for further research include price elasticity across platforms, the marginal value of bar placements, and the extent to which HBO Max exposure brings incremental, not merely shifted, viewers. To summarize, AEW Double or Nothing is a Big Five pay-per-view anchored to Memorial Day weekend, branded by a gambling motif that encodes risk-reward storytelling, and in 2026 delivered a New York tennis stadium spectacle of 12 bouts, a stadium stampede of uncommon breadth, and a title versus hair main event that restored MJF as world champion, following Darby Allin's historic 2-minute 15-second spring victory. Our three questions traced its evolution since 2019. The counterfactual weight of Ricochet's interference on factional geometry, and the open economics of multi-platform distribution. For continued study, we recommend comparing Double or Nothing's role to the other Big Five: All In, All Out, Full Gear, and Revolution, as interlocking nodes of AEW's annual narrative graph.
That was helpful to think through, actually. Thank you, Professor. And thank you for listening to another lecture.
This then completes our present analysis. Until next time.